A brand new account that starts firing at full speed the moment it logs in is the easiest thing for a platform to catch. It does not matter how clean the profile looks, how matched the proxy is, or how real the fingerprint reads, because none of that is what the automation filter watches in the first hour. The filter is watching pace. It is watching how fast the actions come, how evenly they are spaced, and whether the rhythm looks like a person feeling their way around something new or a machine running a list as fast as it can. Warming up an account is the practice of getting that pace right, so a real account you own behaves the way a real person does when they are new. I run fleets of my own accounts across real cloud phones and proxy-backed browser profiles, and I have watched enough of them stumble in week 1 to know speed is what kills them, not identity. Everything here is about warming up your own legitimate accounts so they settle in like real users, not about spamming anyone or slipping past enforcement. The whole point is that a patient account and a genuine one end up looking the same, because a patient account is already behaving the way a genuine one would. For fear, a automation filter actually watches. An automation filter is a rate and rhythm detector before it is anything else. It does not need to understand your intent to flag you. It only needs to notice that your timing does not match a human one. Humans are slow, uneven, and easily distracted. We open an app, read for a while, do one small thing, get pulled away, and come back later. A script does the opposite, moving at a steady mechanical clip with no pauses and no wasted motions. The filter is tuned to that difference, and the faster and cleaner your first session runs, the more it stands out against the messy baseline of real people. Why day one bites hardest? A new account gives a platform nothing personal to compare against, so the filter leans on population-wide expectations instead of your own history. It knows roughly how a real new user behaves in their first hour, and it treats anything far outside that shape as suspect. An aged account with months of ordinary behavior earns slack, because the system has a baseline for it. A day one account has no baseline at all, which means every action is measured against the strictest, most cautious version of normal. That is why behavior that is fine in week 6 can trip a filter cold on the first afternoon. Space is the whole game. If you take one thing from this, take the pace curve. Real adoption ramps. Someone who discovers a platform, pokes at it lightly, does a little more the next day, and eases into a steady rhythm across a week or two. An account that jumps from nothing to its maximum allowed actions in a single sitting matches no real onboarding that has ever happened. A sand ramp might be a handful of actions on the first day, gently more across the first week, and normal usage only by the second or third. The shape of that curve matters far more than the exact numbers. Filling out a believable profile slowly, an empty profile with no photo, no bio, and nothing filled in reads as a placeholder waiting for a task. But a profile that appears fully complete within a minute of the account existing reads almost as badly, because real people do not assemble themselves in one perfect pass. They add a photo, write a rough bio, then come back a day later to fix a typo or add a link as it occurs to them. Build the profile out the way an actual person would, spread across the first few sessions and a little inconsistent, rather than pasting a finished identity into place the instant you sign up. Mix passive behavior with active. Warming up is not only the actions you eventually want the account to take, it is everything around them. Real sessions are mostly passive, scrolling, reading, watching, sitting on a post for a few seconds before moving on. An account that logs in, fires exactly one action, and logs straight back out every single time looks like a tool doing a job, because that is precisely what that pattern is. Building in ordinary idle time from the very first session is cheap, it is one of the easiest human signals to produce convincingly, and one of the most commonly skipped. Never burst your follows. Connections should start small and stay spread out. A few follows or adds in the first days, real attention paid to whatever gets followed. Then a slow increase as the account ages into its second and third week. A burst of dozens of follows in the first hour is the signature of a contact list being uploaded and processed, because very often that is exactly what produced it. Spacing them out and mixing genuine interaction in rather than pure connection volume is the difference between an account building a network and an account running a list against a target. Messaging is the most watched action. Outbound messages deserve their own separate, slower clock. Unsolicited messaging at volume is one of the most heavily scrutinized behaviors on almost any platform, and a new account sending dozens of near-identical messages in its first days is about as loud a signal as exists. Hold off on any real messaging volume until the account has weeks of ordinary, varied activity behind it. And when you do send messages, keep the content genuinely different from one to the next rather than templated. This is the one place where impatience gets punished hardest, so be the most patient here. Quality of engagement over quantity. A like costs nothing and says nothing. A comment that actually responds to the content, a reply inside a thread, a few extra seconds spent on something before scrolling on, all say considerably more, and platforms weigh them accordingly. An account that piles up hundreds of shallow taps and never lingers or replies looks like it is grinding a checklist. Spending less time on more actions and more time on fewer, better ones is a trade worth making early. When your history is thin and every action carries more weight than it will once the account has some age. Let the account age. Time itself is a signal you cannot fake and cannot rush. An account that is 3 days old is treated with more suspicion than one that is 3 months old carrying the exact same profile, because age is evidence of persistence and throwaway setups rarely persist. This is why the calendar is not an obstacle to get around. It is the actual mechanism doing the work. Every quiet, ordinary day an account spends behaving normally is deposited into its trust, and there is no button that pays that balance early. The waiting is not wasted, it is the product. Verify early, adding phone and email verification in the first few sessions, rather than leaving it hanging indefinitely, does quiet, real work. Verification is a small piece of friction that filters out a lot of throwaway setups before they get going, so accounts that clear it early get more benefit of the doubt from the start. It costs almost no time to do, and it lifts the ceiling on everything else the warm-up is trying to build. Do it early and naturally, the way a real person clears the prompts a platform puts in front of them when they first sign up. Respect each platform's early thresholds. Not every platform runs the same clock, and treating them all the same wastes either time or safety margin. A casual social account might earn reasonable trust in 2 or 3 weeks of ordinary use. An account tied to selling, payments, or advertising sits under scrutiny far longer, because the money attached to it raises the stakes on both sides. And a platform in the middle of dealing with a wave of abuse will tighten its default caution for everyone for a while. The warm-up itself does not change, but the calendar it runs on does, and assuming a fixed number of days works everywhere is how people get caught out. One profile, one network, one account should stay tied to one browser profile, and one proxy for the whole warm-up from the first session to the last. Hopping it between devices or swapping its assigned proxy partway through reintroduces exactly the inconsistency a filter loves. A login history that suddenly shows a different fingerprint or a different network with no believable reason for the change. Keep the pairing stable through the warm-up window and only ever revisit it later once the account has genuine age and a long, boring, consistent trail behind it to absorb the change. Stagger a fleet against itself. If you are warming up more than one account, they have to be staggered against each other, not just each shaped like a real user on its own. A dozen profiles that all cross the same milestone in the same hour rebuild a timing correlation at the fleet level, even when every account looks fine in isolation. Stagger the start dates by days, stagger the daily action windows by hours, and treat the fleet's overall rhythm as its own thing to manage. A filter that keys on synchronization takes the whole synchronized group at once, so the goal is for your own accounts to look like strangers to each other. An unexpected restriction means slow down. Sometimes a restriction or a verification prompt shows up mid-ramp anyway, and the reflex is to push straight through it. Resist that. Treat an unexpected restriction as the account telling you the pace is running too hot, not as a wall to force. Forcing through, it reads as exactly the stubborn persistence a coordinated setup would show. The opposite of what you want the filter to see. A short pause, a slower resumed pace, and genuinely ordinary activity in between recovers an account standing far more reliably than pressing harder ever does. Watch the feedback the account gives you. A warm-up is not something you set and walk away from. It is something you watch. Reach quietly dropping, verification prompts appearing where they did not before. Captchas showing up more often than they did last week. These are the account telling you whether the current pace is working or leaning too hard on the filter. Easing the ramp down the moment you see them beats plowing ahead and finding out 3 weeks later that you pushed a fragile account over a line it had been quietly warning you about all along. Patience is the only real method. Underneath all of it, the actual method is time plus consistency, and there is no clever trick that removes the weight. Anyone selling you an instant warm-up is really selling a faster route to getting flanked, not a way around the filter. The accounts that hold up are, without exception, the ones that were never in a hurry. And operators who do this well think in weeks and fleets rather than single afternoons and single accounts. A warm-up is boring on purpose, because boring is exactly what a real, settled, trusted account looks like from the outside. I warm up my own fleets exactly like this, across real cloud phones and proxy-backed profiles, because staggering dozens of accounts by hand does not scale on guesswork, and getting the ramp wrong gets expensive fast, in lost accounts and the time it takes to rebuild them. The full guides and tested picks are at multiaccountops.com, including the warm-up schedules and the cloud phone and proxy setups I actually pair them with. Tested on real accounts I run myself, rather than theorized on a forum somewhere. If you are building a fleet instead of babysitting one account, that is the place to start. Subscribe for more honest, tested multi-account ops. Next time, residential proxy providers compared for multi-accounting, which pools actually hold up, which ones get you flagged on site, and how to tell before you tie a whole fleet to the wrong one.